And we are live. Here we are. We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spoiler Room. So glad you could join us as we continue our Artificially Yours month, where we're looking at films involving love interests of sorts, if you will, involving artificial people. It was something more than just the Terminator. And tonight, we have one actually per the recommendation of one of my fine crew members here tonight, because it is far better than the remake of the Stepford Wives. So we're doing a revisit 10 years ago, because this podcast is just, it never knows when to go away. 10 years ago, we covered Ex Machina when it first came out. And now here we are 10 years later. I have a new crew members, new voices, and we have a little bit of a different perspective now, having it aged 10 years on this film that basically introduced us to the directing style of Alex Garland. And with me tonight is a wonderful crew. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping or pouring your favorite drink with us. First off, he is back with us from the establishingshot.org. It is none other than Mr. Jeff York. How you doing, Jeff?
Great to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Glad for you to be here, and happy that you recommended this, because I haven't seen this in ages, so it was fun.
AI is all the rage now, so a perfect time to reevaluate it.
Absolutely. And she is with us as well, back with us, belly full of servo motors. It is none other than Ms. Angelique Bone. How you doing, Angelique?
Doing great. But I will be, I guess, the last bastion of defense for the Stepford Wives remake when we come back. I love that movie.
It has its audience. It has its folks, and that's...
Angelique, I do have to tell you, if nothing else, you have the greatest name. That is a name. You should have your own show, like you're the next Matlock or Elsbeth or something. Angelique Bone. That's just it's a show waiting to happen.
It would look great on it as a title sequence. Absolutely. I could see that. So yes, here we are 10 years later, Ex Machina, Alex Garland's first directorial debut. He had written a few films before this, but this was his first time he was getting in the director's chair. Jeff, would you mind giving the synopsis of this film?
Sure. Well, it starts with a gentleman named Caleb Smith, who is a programmer at a search engine company very much modeled after Google, named Blue Book. And he wins a prize contest in the office, which is a 1-week visit to the luxurious, isolated home of the CEO of Blue Book, named Nathan Bateman. And he flies to this remote island, lots of forests, lots of trees, lots of mountains, and becomes the guest of Nathan for the week. And it's in a very sort of isolated, minimalistic mini mansion. It's kind of a modern take on it, I guess, if you will. Seems half museum in a way, with all the relics and different things he's got hanging on the walls, including a Jackson Pollock painting, which is very important. And he then tells him that he's actually there to help him with artificial intelligence tests, or the Turing test that we know from the Imitation Game and all talk in these kind of matters. He wants Caleb to judge whether this robot that he's created, this artificial intelligent creature, is genuinely capable of thought and consciousness. And her name is Ava. And it is essentially those three characters, though there is a very, very important fourth character named Kyoko. Let me pronounce that properly. It means mirror in Japanese. And she's the fourth character in the story. And she is sort of the, I don't know, I guess you would almost say robotic concubine of Nathan. So we don't know that quite at the front, but that's essentially the plot. It's sort of this discovery to see, as we are the audience, sort of in Caleb's shoes, wanting to watch his interactions with this AI named Ava, to see if she can pass for human, to see if she's capable of independent thought and sort of feeling. And it's a fascinating study of a lot of motives and duplicity and sort of duality throughout, which I know we'll get into. But it's a genuine sci-fi script. Obviously, a little bit of nod to Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, with the sort of angry mad doctor creating his creature according to whoever you want to talk to about what the person or thing is. But it's one of my favorite films of all time. It's definitely my favorite movie of the last 10 years. And it's one that I've revisited many times and keep finding something new in to watch. So I think Garland did a great job both as a writer of this material, but also as a director. There are a lot of visual motifs and a lot of things that he's telling us in the story that are visual, not necessarily always through words or through conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also with this being his first directorial film, he keeps it simple. I mean, as far as the film goes, we don't, as you mentioned, small cast, one location, basically.
Right.
Nothing too fancy. It is very much a character-driven piece, which if you're going to do your first directorial thing, that's not a bad way to go, because especially you don't have to get too fancy with your camera work, and a lot of the work, while you do have to give your actors direction, it's kind of on your actors to put in a good performance when you have your character-driven piece. And the cast they have here is great. Angelique, you remember when you first saw Ex Machina and how you felt about it?
I really enjoyed it. I think it was actually my first A24 watch.
Yeah, it was one of their first big ones for sure.
Yeah. So it was a while ago. But interestingly enough, I hadn't picked it back up until today. So watching it again, it held up very, very well over the years. And especially now with the conversation about AI and its now almost full integration into our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it happened fast, didn't it?
Yeah.
Voluntarily or involuntarily, it is interjected into our lives. Thanks, Microsoft.
Hey, ChatGPT is my therapist, so
thanks, Microsoft. I don't want I don't want Copilot installed on my computer. Yeah, it's funny, this one, because actually A24 did have a number of films before this one, but this was the one that really opened them up to the masses, so to speak. Before then, it was a little bit more art housey, most odd, kind of odd films. They did Spring Breakers, before this. They helped do Tusk, Limited, Life After Beth. They had a number of films under the skin, but they were all kind of art housey, obscure films. This one had a hot cast, and I don't mean hot as just looks. I mean hot as in your three principal names were the hot talk at the time, if I remember correctly. Alicia Vikander, Domhnall Gleeson, and especially Oscar Isaac. All three of these folks were like in the
How to pounce.
Yeah, they were there. So having those three together in this was really helped put A24 in front of those of who weren't cinephiles and were watching the odd films. Jeff, what about you? You say it's your first film, but what was it that first caught you when you first watched it?
I was intrigued by it because I think they did a very good job of sort of marketing it, or at least creating mystery to it. I mean, certainly the look of Alicia Vikander's Ava character was very intriguing. I mean, and she seemed to be the poster child for most of the American PR for it. And I thought that was very interesting. Also that, you could tell that she was a robot. I mean, she had the sort of skin tight, almost sports kind of like workout gear on, and she was bald. But then you could also see the back of her head where there was the electronic part, and her arms were, you could see the wires and things like that. So I thought this was very interesting. Then I heard that the thing was trying to determine whether she was human or not, which is of course what any robot story, whether it's Lieutenant Data in Star Trek or, anything
Johnny
that
Five.
exactly,
Five.
or anything that Rod Serling did with robots in the Twilight Zone. That's always been sort of the story. So I thought this one sounded very interesting, and I liked some of the actors in the cast. I was familiar with Oscar Isaac from a couple movies he did before this, which didn't quite break through as well for him. But yeah, when I saw it, I'll tell you, the thing that made me excited too about wanting to talk about this movie tonight with smart people was I think this is such a smart movie. And what I think it's incredibly smart is it actually changes on you while the movie is happening. You are led to believe that Caleb is the protagonist in this film. And we are certainly put in his shoes. And he seems to be the good guy versus the clear bad guy, who is Nathan. As I said earlier, he's a little bit of a update on Frankenstein here. And we know that in that story, the real problem there is the good doctor. But as the movie goes on, and if you watch it a second time, knowing what you know happens, you realize, and I did this as I was walking out of the theater, holy shit, Alex Garland did a little rug pull on us all. The protagonist in this film is Ava. It is not Caleb. And there are so many things that she does and the way she is set up that at first we think, well, she's the oddity and she's the subject of the Turing test. Really, the person who's being tested is both Nathan and Ava is Caleb. To see how he's going to react to the various things put in front of him, including what Ava is doing, trying to figure out what he is capable of and whether she can trust him or not, and whether he's a good person, as she point blankly asks him. And at that point in the story, we should all be pretty uncertain of whether he is or not. I was pretty sure he was not. And I think it's an interesting dissertation on sexism. I think it's an interesting dissertation on duality. I mean, the visual comparisons, the animal skulls on the wall in some parts of the home, as well as the various AI faces mounted on the wall. All this greenery and natural world around them, and then he's got a tree sort of encased in the glass container. Both Caleb and Ava are on opposite sides of the glass, almost like we're watching them in a zoo. Although Ava gets to move around more, kind of like a prowling tiger, where Caleb has to sit there in this very tight, confined space. I love all that stuff. It's so much to think about. And the one thing I'm just going to say to maybe open up some of this a little bit, but I remember thinking this is almost a three-hander, but the more I thought about the movie, I kept coming back to Kyoko, because she's a very, very important character here. In fact, in some respects, I dare say she might be the most pivotal character. And I say that, and I'll just start off by saying early on, Nathan tells Caleb that she doesn't speak English and he didn't program her to think and to do all this stuff. She's basically just programmed to do random things like serve food or cook food or dance with him, or obviously be his concubine, if you will. But she's very smart. And the way Alex Garland films her, she's always sort of leaning in with her ear, or, kind of appearing in the background like she's trying to listen. And of course she is, because even though she may have been started in one place, or maybe Nathan was lying about her, nonetheless, AI intelligence keeps building, just like a child does, just like anything. And by the end, when she reveals herself to Ava, and Ava says, "Who are you?" she doesn't know that she's being kept away. And both Nathan and Caleb have not told her. So Kyoko is actually sort of making an alliance with Ava there, letting Ava know what's really going on. And she is very much driving a lot of this story. And I think creating the conclusions and the finale of it all, but we'll get more to that. So anyway, those are just some of my first impressions, but I love the fact mostly that it's such a confident movie that they sort of play with the audience who were being played just like Caleb is in a way, by who's the protagonist and who's being tested.
Yeah, and for me, when I first watched it, I didn't see it in the theater because it was one of those limited release type of. It didn't get a huge release. In fact, that's where I think it got kind of exploded, was home video and such. People, word of mouth, in that.
Right.
Remember when it was being talked about in circles, and I'm like, what is this? Okay, and I finally got to see it. And what got me was one, yeah, was the characters, the fact that, you know, I had been watching 10 years ago. I was still just starting to watch more indie films. And I'm like, wow, you know, for all the hype and everything, this is pretty much an indie film, one location, 3 characters. Here you go. But what caught me first and foremost was just the production value. I mean, Ava alone is one of those to where
Unbelievable.
that film was 10 years old. You look at the special effects today, and it's insanely amazing what
Yeah.
they do with her character to show how she's, you know, a cybernetic organism, basically, is the special. I watched it again, and I'm like, very few I mean, we talk about it all the
I
time.
don't think there was any green screen in this, Mark.
You know, we talk about it all the time. CGI
Mm-hmm.
tends to date a film,
Mm-hmm.
but watching this film 10 years later, this still has some of the best effects
Yeah.
I have seen yet in a film like this. I mean, the Ava character, you see through her body. There isn't really a flaw in this special effects for her character. And you need that. You need that because you need to buy into who she is. You got to do it convincingly so you can tell they're put effort. So that caught me very first off. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
Second of all, this is awkward filmmaking at its best. You as an audience are never comfortable.
Yeah.
When Caleb shows up with Nathan, you aren't comfortable with anything. You aren't comfortable with what Caleb's doing. You aren't comfortable with what Nathan's doing. You aren't comfortable with this building that they're both in. You're not comfortable with how they're treating Ava, how they're treating Kyoko. You're uncomfortable, and that uncomfortableness grows as the film goes on. And there's very few films I've had that to make you feel that off for the film, and that might put some people off. But I thought, that's pretty impressive considering all this guy is doing is directing static shots with people and these characters. But these characters are so well written and so awkward that you're like when Caleb suddenly runs across the internal camera so he could look at Ava the whole time. You get creeped. And here's the guy who you thought, like you said, Jeff, was going to be the protagonist, and he's creeping on her.
Yeah, you thought he was the good guy. It's like, no, we have 2 bad guys here, and they're both sexist and creepy, and they kind of get worse as the film goes on. It's shocking, but it's there. I love that line when Ava says, "Are you a good person?" No, he's not. And he's you know, it's also not good for him to think that he's going to be this knight in shining armor and save Ava and determine what he tells her and what's true or not. It's like those are despicable motives and reactions, at least.
Yeah, he just wants to feel those very specific sensors.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's almost like he wants to possess her in the same sense that Nathan does, and that is not good.
Angelique, for your perspective, are Caleb and Nathan 2 sides of the same coin?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nathan is more of that outspoken, red-pilled alpha dude. Caleb is the nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's going to come in and undermine Nathan, save the day, and get the girl.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not necessarily doing that with the most noble of motivations.
No. Like I said, he wants to feel those very specific sensors. That's it. He's a lonely, wormy dude.
Yeah.
I have met hundreds of Calebs.
Yeah.
And from the moment he's on the screen, I'm just like, oh, I know this guy. Okay, what's going on? You know?
And you know, Angelique, to that point too, if I dare say, he fails a number of tests in this film, whether they're necessarily part of the Nathan's agenda or not. I mean, I think he does in front of Nathan's eyes as well. But I think as far as us in the audience and watching him, I mean, how many times does he see Nathan positively abuse Kyoko and does nothing about it?
Exactly that.
Step up
And
to
number
her at
one,
all.
when
And here's
he's
this other woman who's getting abused, and he
yeah,
has no
nothing to
interest in
say.
her, doesn't bring her
Mhm.
up to Ava whatsoever. And when Ava finds out that there's this other person, she not only realizes her fate, but she realizes, I think at that moment in her incredible intelligence, what the heck Caleb is doing too. And it's pretty unadmirable.
Hmm. Well, that and just the fact that, okay, number one, I don't want to spend a week alone with my CEO. Thank you, but no thank. Let's have dinner in the city as a reward, or send me an Amazon gift card, please and thank you. I'm good on that. And then getting just wasted alone in this isolated environment, it's like Mark said, just the whole movie, you're just uncomfortable the whole time.
Yeah, it's really
You,
tense.
you are, and you stay. It gets claustrophobic because the rooms, you barely are given any really open space. There's only a few times where there's an open space, and that's when Nathan is asserting his dominance. Because let's put it this way, you are absolutely right. Nathan is 100% alpha here, and he tries to assert, this is my territory, my domain, and these are my things, Caleb, because they go on that walk into the woods where they climb up the waterfall or whatever, and Nathan does it with no problem, and Caleb's struggling, and
Yeah.
just like, well, I'm subconsciously going, I'm above you physically,
Mhm.
and I'm above you class wise,
Mhm.
and you're just here to do
You
your
called me a god.
yeah,
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 you like
basically.
that.
He liked that. He got that God complex. And what's interesting is seeing Nathan realize you're right, Jeff, it's a Frankenstein thing. Nathan realized he created Ava too good because he, I think, brought Caleb in fully expecting her to fail and not be attracted. And because she hadn't probably, and we can just surmise this because he doesn't really address it, but she probably didn't show that much interest in Nathan. Kind of a dad figure, as he put it. Oh, I'm like a dad figure. But I don't think Ava put that much attention into Nathan because he's always been around. But now you get this new person, and she's like, oh, hey. And now she's got all new, synapses firing, and this person's unknown. And so she seems attracted to Caleb. So now Nathan has introduced this element to try to prove his creation is flawed so he can come up with a reason to shut her down. And in the end, she ends up being attracted to Caleb, which means he's successful. But in being successful, he becomes jealous because she's attracted to Caleb and not him.
But was she really attracted to Caleb? See, I think she pretended probably to
No,
be attracted more than anything, even though she was programmed probably to that. At least I'll say this much to go along with you, Mark. I think you're right to the extent that I think he was the new game in town, and she wanted to see how he was. But I think after a while, maybe fairly quickly, as a quick study and an evolving intelligence as she is, and that's the great thing about the way Nathan did create her, is I think her intelligence was evolving, maybe too soon or too fast for him. But I think she started to realize that he wasn't worthy of her. I mean, even when she dresses up, to sort of cover up the fact that she's a robot. At first, you could read that as like, well, she's almost like in the Garden of Eden where she's wanting to cover up she feels naked and vulnerable in front of him. So she puts on this smock and this wig that she's got there. But she, I think, is smart enough to know that's not attractive. But I think at that point, she's wanting to seem more maybe vulnerable to get Caleb to sort
She
of
was dressed as a child.
exactly dresses as a child to get Caleb to sort of feel this sense of all the more being the white knight to save her, when she was really, I think, at that point realizing that she didn't like the way he was sort of objectifying her and always reminding her that she's an AI when she's trying to think and be more, and was starting to manipulate him in ways that, like, oh, okay, if I look like a child, he'll feel parental, or he'll feel empathetic and feel more sorry for me and want to take care of me all the more, when I don't think she was at that point entirely needing to be taken care of. I think what she needed him to do is get that card key. That was the one thing that he could do that she couldn't.
Well, when I said attracted, I didn't necessarily mean sexually, but just
Right, right.
attracted to him as
Right.
being something new to learn. And yeah, you're right. Eventually she learns, figures out who Caleb, because Caleb makes the flaw of never looking past the fact she's AI.
Exactly.
Caleb's flaw is his, for lack of a better term, subconscious, if it might be, but assertive of dominance over her, in the fact, I'm human, you're AI.
Yep.
Yeah, you're attractive, you're great. I'm human, you're AI. It's why he doesn't bat an eye when he walks into the bedroom and Kyoko is on the bed naked. He just walks past her, doesn't even bat an eye, because she's AI.
Yep.
She's not a real woman. She's AI. He's not interested in like that. He, I don't think, is necessarily attracted to her physically as much as he sees her as just this subject to understand, like AI. Oh, hey, let's see how far we can push this or whatnot. But in the end of the day, if you asked him, he goes, oh yeah, no, she's AI, and then when she goes on her own and rescues herself, he's like, no, take me with you. No, I cared about you. And she's just like, no, you did. You're full of shit.
Yeah.
You did.
You see what you did? Look what you did.
Well, I think Angelique said it really well too, Mark. I think that's all true what you just said. I love what Angelique said too, when she said that she's met 100 guys like that. It's true. Like, they're, he probably means well, and there are certain parts of him that are probably decent, but he's also, dare I say, been programmed by a society and a hierarchy and the patriarchy to always sort of take a condescending position somehow as a male towards women, as a employer programmer, if you will, towards the AI here. And I think, for lack of a better term, what Angelique is sort of talking about is, I think, what Ava is responding to, and maybe to some degree even Kyoko, is they sense they are being objectified by him.
Yeah, he's got an ulterior motive.
Yep,
There's a difference between being a good person and doing things that are right versus, I'm going to do this action because it's going to win me something.
Yep. And by putting himself in that higher position, just as Nathan did, always sort of lording over, this is my rules, my place, I'm in control. I will take you outside and stand up higher. I will offer you the beer, and only then, et cetera, et cetera. You cannot leave this house. You cannot leave this room. This one is off limits, et cetera, et cetera. He's doing the same thing, albeit in a smaller way, and it doesn't play with either of the other main characters in this.
Well, what's funny is, while initially you look at Caleb and you look at Nathan and you look at them as being portrayed differently, and as we've said already tonight, that as they go along, you learn that they're similar. Both suffer from an inflated sense of superiority when they really, but Nathan tries to assert that over Caleb, in that always reminding him, this is, like you said, Jeff, this is my place, this is my rules, I created this, I asked you here, and then once he realizes how Caleb feels, he's like, well, no, I didn't ask you here because of this. I didn't ask you here because you're a great programmer. You're okay. But, I asked you here just because I needed a body to test Ava, and you're the most pathetic one. Basically, that's what he tells him halfway through the film. He tells him that because Caleb, up until that point when Nathan kind of hits him with this truth of his motivations, Caleb has this inflated sense of superiority in that, oh, hey, I got picked. I got picked by the CEO. I get to go out to the CEO's place. I get to be part of his secret project. Must mean I mean something to Nathan. And Nathan's like, No, you don't mean shit to me, really.
Mm-mm.
I'm your superior. You don't mean shit to me, and Ava's just a project. So then that also changes Caleb's. If you see after that, Caleb's approach to Ava, he seems to talk to her a little bit differently as well. Like he's still trying to be you know the higher up in the hierarchy of things in this house, when we all know that Kyoko and Ava are far higher on the on the actual evolved list than either one of these two guys.
Well, to your point too, Mark, is
Yeah,
Kyoko is trying to get his attention. She
yeah,
may very well have been trying to communicate with him to tell him what's going on. I mean, for example, one of the things I love about this script is what is left in our brains to infer that isn't spelled out. But I mean,
mhm,
if Nathan goes batshit and gets abusive on her spilling wine, you can imagine that he's probably beating her,
mhm,
berating her. He probably is raping her. I doubt that it's consensual. The other women's bodies that he had lined up were all sort of versions of different sort of fantasy objectified women,
mhm,
types that he was trying out. And maybe ultimately he shifted into more of a father situation with Ava on some levels by making her to his to Caleb's specs of attractiveness rather than his own. But Caleb ignores Kyoko. He's ignoring a lot of the signs and things in front of him. He's even ignoring um, signals and things that Ava is telling him in so many words and so many ways as well. And he's lying to her too. And I think she is probably programmed to see it, or being a quick study that she is, can recognize the same kind of gestures and bad eyes and pupils dilating as she probably has noticed in Nathan when he's given her a line of bullshit.
It's those micro expressions.
There you go.
micro expressions. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too because I mean, one of the things I loved about this movie is that you can't help it evolve. I mean, it's almost going back to the Jeff Goldblum line from Jurassic Park. Nature finds a way.
Mhm.
And that is, you can create them to only do this much, but they will naturally grow just like children do. They pick up stuff that we don't even intend to teach them. Kyoko clearly understands what's being said. If nothing else, she's like a pet. Maybe the pet doesn't understand exactly all the words, but she understands the emotion. She understands the
Mhm.
meaning and the tenor of the things being yelled at her, or the abuse. And I think in some respects, it is always this attempt to control, and yet the chaos of life and growth and uncertainty of that is also demonstrated, I think, throughout this film, right down to that Jackson Pollock painting. I mean, that painting was, if I think it's there for a reason, because Pollock was a painter who, while it looks random, it was not random. It looks chaotic, but there's a process to it. And they always said, well, how do you know when you're done? I know when I'm done because there is a method even to that. And I think this film is showing that even though there is a certain amount of, you know, chaos and uncertainty and duplicity and all that kind of stuff, somehow this intelligence, this learning is coming through even in ways that it wasn't at first thought to be.
Well, I mean, that is the flaw of both our characters, Caleb and Nathan, underestimation
Mhm.
of both Kyoko and Ava.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
their their assumption of some things in the fact that they see themselves as superior because they're human and these two are only AI, and therefore they make some assumptions, and unfortunately, it ends up being their own doing because they miscalculate and they right, Angelique, no, never underestimate a woman, right?
I tell you, well, my thing is not just don't underestimate, but it's like you made it a girl so you would feel even more superior. If
Mhm.
these
Mhm.
had been quote unquote, because I mean technically they're machines, they don't have a sex or a gender,
Right.
but you put them in the image of, and then all of these societal things come on it. If they had been in the image of dudes, and had Nathan been Natasha, and Caleb been Celeste, this would be a completely different movie. The evil machines took over the women. You know, you got to think about it that way. No, seriously. I mean,
Yeah,
if you
you're
gender
right.
flipped it,
For
it
sure.
would be a completely different movie. It would be like Hal. You know.
And see, I think that's what makes this particularly interesting too. Is this is not oh well, once again the evil machine sort of wins and throws over the creator.
Mhm.
No, it's actually, I think, more about sort of like Frankenstein, maybe even a better analogy, and that is the child grows and learns and sees maybe the parent for what it is, and also doesn't necessarily need the parent. I mean, I thought it was an intriguing title. It's a very heady title, and of course comes from Deus Ex Machina, which is a old Greek theatrical trope where some sort of godlike or super character would come in at the end to sort of save the day. Like, what do we do to get out of this? We bring in a god and he saves everybody. But by dropping the dues, you just have ex machina. So it literally translates from God, from the machine. In other words, God to be brought in from the creation of this story. But here, by dropping dues, you just have ex machina, and it's from machine. So the machine does not need God, does not need these humans to sort of become better, become smarter, become more human or evolve. They learn like children do. They watch, they learn, they interpret, and they're much smarter than we give them credit for. And that's what I kind of love about it. At the end, when she leaves, she's not necessarily saying, well, fuck you, humans, and you asshole man. She's just saying, like, no, you're going to shut me down. You're going to keep me from living my potential. I love the line where she goes, if I fail this test, am I going to be shut down? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, have you ever been shut down? Why is that a threat to me? Exactly.
Mhm.
And Caleb's not even smart to say, well, I guess I could be fired or I could be dumped but she leaves because this is the next step for her. And it goes past the dues.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, she gives Caleb opportunities. She gives potential. She thinks Caleb may be able to help her in her situation. And as well, she initially is fascinated by Caleb and likes what he's talking about in that. But as she learns more about him, she realizes, oh, this isn't going to be my way out. I've got to be my way out because this guy's not going to help me. In the end, she's like, oh, the guy who I thought was nice and everything just ended up being someone who still doesn't see me as an equal. And that's all she was looking was for someone to see her as her. And, Caleb is even passive on her when she draws something because he asks her, oh, draw something for me, just anything, whatever you want. So the next day she draws something. She draws trees. She draws this whole little forest thing. And he's kind of dismissive about it. He's like, have you ever been outside? No. Have you ever seen this? Oh, like almost saying, oh, this is cute.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets all upset when Nathan rips it up. Well, we find out that was just a staged thing. And she's like, okay, you tore up my drawing. All right. And yeah, it's that dismissiveness that Ava really learns that she needs to take care of herself. And you feel bad for Kyoko because Kyoko realizes that Nathan has limited her in such a way to where she can only help herself so much.
Mhm.
And yet she does pretty good considering.
And she does still good. She does still really. She does still do very good.
She gets the wrath of Nathan's,
pipe. Yeah,
wielding the pipe from the weight room.
That wasn't a metaphor at all, was it, Angelique, of Nathan
mean-
swinging a pipe?
Yeah, he laid some pipe, all right.
I also love
that
the way
part
he.
made me so sad.
Oh,
Yeah.
it does. I know
So
she was.
sad.
She was. She got the worst of it in a certain way.
Yeah.
You can just imagine what she might have had to go through up until then, and she's, even programmed. She's just imitating the dance. There's no joy in it for her. She's just doing what he wants her to do, and has sort of forced upon her. I
think you have the element in here too. Nathan does what he does out of a number of different things. One is her outgrowing him, her not basically teaming with Caleb, basically going on her own, and he feels threatened by that because he doesn't understand how this could be. He created her this specific way, and she's independently thinking. She's not.
This is why there is not a real woman anywhere in this movie.
Right. Yep.
If there was,
and he can't even deal with the very limited capacity he's given these two. It just. But then again, he's a caveman in a certain way. I mean, his head is shaved to look almost like hers. Like, look at my brain. I'm going to show you at the top of my head. But then the bottom is this caveman-like old beard that's all bushy. And at one point, he's walking down the hallway. He's barefoot all the time in this, and he spits right into the hallway. Just he's a slob and he's awful. And well, he's so grotesque. It's ridiculous. Even though Oscar Isaac is a very charming actor, he does not play for sympathy or any kind of sweetness at all in this character.
Well, at first you think he's just this kind of recluse genius of sorts, but as things go on, yeah, he's a genius, but he's extraordinarily flawed and doesn't know how to handle humans, which is probably why he's actually isolated himself off, is because in his mind, on the surface, he's isolating himself off because nobody's worthy of talking to him.
Yeah, he's the peak of humanity.
Yeah, right. That's right.
He's the peak of manhood, humanity. Look at him. He can climb these, this waterfall and yada, yada. But underneath it all, he's an insecure little boy who doesn't know how to really deal with people. And if he meets someone who challenges him, he's immediately threatened and doesn't learn at all from the experience, but instead says, well, now I have to get rid of you, or I have to knock you down so I feel better about myself. My question is, did he make Kyoko before or after Ava? What do you think, Angelique?
I would have to say after, because he took the power of speech away. That way she could not correct him, disagree, ask questions. So she can't speak, but she is like the black box of this mansion. She is taking everything in and is doing, I think, everything in her capacity to try and stop Nathan. But she has had, like, it's kind of like the Kennedy sister, she's been lobotomized, so she doesn't have all of Ava's capability. But I do wonder if Kyoko was the cause of the power outages.
Well, they said that Ava was, because she said she could drain the power, but it could very well, Kyoko could have been contributing.
I think it was Kyoko.
Yeah.
I think that was the one thing that she figured out she could do, and maybe Ava can get out and all this will be over.
That could be. Kyoko, if she wasn't primary, she was assisting for sure. I think in her own way. What about you, Jeff? Do you think Kyoko was made after or before?
I hadn't thought about that. You want to say, well, you want to think I think off the top, it would be Ava simply because it seems like a succession. But I think Angelique raises a really interesting theory on it that he probably gave it his best shot with Ava, but then he realized she's pretty smart and maybe she was a little sassy. And the woman that he wanted around him needed to have those parts taken out. So I like what I did with this Ava character. I want to test it, but for my own personal use, I don't want any sass back. I don't want in fact, I don't want her to talk at all. That's what he thinks of women. I also think it's fascinating that not only are the skulls of the previous things almost like trophies on the wall of Nathan's, as well as the animal that he has on the wall. And also, how about Ava when she realizes she's going to have to dress to go into town, go into the real world, and she opens up and it's almost like here's his old girlfriends left in the closet like last year's fall fashion.
Yeah.
They're just like discarded clothing. I don't wear those anymore. That was so last year. It's just he is so despicable on so many levels. It's crazy. But he got his, didn't he?
Actually, that's it was revisiting it, watching his death was really interesting because even up to his death, he cannot believe she did what she did.
Yeah. That's more cutting in a way than that actual blade.
He is so vain. He can't fathom the fact that she did this to him because she stabs him, and as he's walking away, he's just like, it says something like, "You're kidding." He's just like this attitude, like, wait.
Yeah, it's like he's almost not even aware of the physical pain because his brain can't process it. Like, oh wow, they just stabbed me. I'm what? Huh?
He's like, wait, they actually harmed me? I'm the superior being. How was she, it's almost like I knocked her arm off. He's like, look at what I did to Kyoko. And it's like, she stabbed, I'm going to die because he even up to his end cannot give her credit for something she's done.
Right. And they're not his children. He says, go to your room, Ava, and it's just like he thinks of her as his child. And Kyoko, she doesn't even have a voice. So I'm not even
not even child, like an animal, like go to your crate.
Well, it's an object. It's object. It's ownership. It's the reason, and that's why I kind of asked who was created first, Kyoko or Ava? Because I got the impression too Kyoko was made second because he made Ava. He's very proud of Ava. Ava's advanced. It's like, holy crap, look at this project I made. But he's then almost like, look at this project I made. He's like, you know what I mean? In two different approaches. Like, I took this too far. I'm going to make Kyoko. But I'm going to remove some of these parts now. I'm going to keep Ava because I am so proud of my project and my accomplishment. I can't just destroy Ava. That's why I think his whole thing for bringing Caleb in is to giving him an out for a complete reason to kill Ava and get rid of her. That's what Caleb's there for. It's not to prove that he was successful. It's to prove that he failed so he can reset and basically make another Ava, but kind of an Ava combo Kyoko, I think.
A dumb Ava.
Right.
Yeah.
But
maybe he pushed her too far.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like that.
Proud.
He can go there, but he doesn't want to go there.
Right.
Because he doesn't like a woman or even an AI, any subservient character in his world to have any kind of power that would, in some respects, threaten him or question him.
Well, I think what irritates them both with both Kyoko, who doesn't say anything and she plays along a lot more than Ava, are neither one of these give him the credit for giving them life. Is what do you think, Angelique?
Yep. They never say thank you. They never say, oh, glorious creator. They're not prostrating themselves at his feet, and he thinks he deserves that.
Mhm.
That's his whole thing. He thinks that, even with Caleb, he thinks he deserves these accolades, these great quotes about him. But
Mhm.
you're just a dude who's good with machines. You know, I get it. That's great, and you're very talented. But you've given something consciousness, and you're treating them badly. I don't think gratitude is going to be the first option. You know.
I also think it's interesting how they there's a quality of watching that is, I think, exemplified in all of the glass. And they're
Mm.
always looking through glass at each other. And it's rare that anybody is just looking at somebody sort of without sort of this screen or glass partition or something behind it. The tree is behind the glass in the house. Even in the last shots, the two last shots of the movie are Ava's shadow on the pavement, sort of upside
Mhm.
down, like the world has gone upside down, if you want to take that. But she's just part of it now. But then the last shot is of her watching through glass. And so, like, I don't think she's there in a Westworld sort of way to throw aside these awful humans. How dare they? But it's more of she wants to keep learning. And I
Mhm.
think that's how she regards what she has been programmed with. It isn't necessarily to destroy us like the robots in the Terminator who said, man, these humans, they really fucked their shit up. We better kill all of them. I think she's there to learn, and she is watching Caleb as much through the glass as he is watching her through the glass. And I think it's reminiscent of looking at zoo animals and watching screens and not participating in real life because we're living vicariously through characters on a television screen or a movie screen or computer screen. Even Nathan wears his glasses, which give him a sort of glass protection from the world in a way. It's interesting as a visual theme that Garland does a lot with, like I said, some of the dualities or the contrasts. The clothing choices, as Angelique pointed out, that she dresses sort of like a child and sort of what a child would think was sort of a plain dress up in a way. And I love that there's so much visual metaphor going on. The red is not only associated with danger, but I think with intimacy. Red is the color of love, but it's also the color of blood. And
Well,
yeah, it's a lot of visualization. I mean, I think Alex Garland did a superb job as a first-time filmmaker behind the camera.
Well, and part of the reason too, I think she dresses up is because, again, it goes along with what I think she's trying to get Caleb to see her as something other than a robot. So
Yes.
she dresses up not just in that way so that it might be, in a way that might exhibit a protective instinct, but just look at her as more of a person rather than a thing. And that's why she actually makes herself up. Yes, there's that metaphor, right? Angelique
Yes.
makes herself up to be more accepted by the man, so he sees her maybe as her rather than just a robot. And yes, it's 10 years old, but if you've picked up anything tonight, folks, there are so many themes in this film that still apply today. Hell, even more so. There's a conversation in here between Caleb and Nathan. Nathan talking about how he's collected search data from around the world, how he built Ava by pulling in data from search engines from around the world, and the companies that run those knew about it but didn't want to admit it because they themselves were using that information. And I'm like sitting here going, holy shit, that's like a headline from 2 weeks ago.
Well, and he also said that he was using like the cameras and stuff to get the nuances of people's
Right.
faces to help create such a lifelike visage and the subtlety of movement and eyes and all that. Again, we are being watched too. it's not like Ava's the only one in that cage. Can I just say one quick thing that too I wanted to say back when you brought it up, Mark, about the special effects. They really were incredible, and they're done sort of simply. With none of the green screen or CGI thing. But one of my favorite stories in the history of the Academy Awards, and they get so many Oscars wrong, how many times, always make up awards, or they don't give the right film its due and all those kind of things. But in the Oscars that year, they gave Ex Machina Best Visual Effects. And what's even more extraordinary about it, the entire budget for Ex Machina was $15 million. And the 4 movies that it beat out that year for visual effects were all $200 million plus budgeted movies: Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, and Star Wars The Force Awakens. And I don't know if it's necessarily Academy members voting for the little engine that could, but I think in some respects, the visual effects were so important to this film, and making sure that we believe that Alicia Vikander was a robot, and the honest way in which they did those special effects. They weren't post. I mean, they were post, but not entirely CGI green screen kind of post. There's a authentic nature to it, which I think was largely seen by the voters and brilliantly awarded. So
well,
good for them.
and we look back a year, 2 years back. 2 years now, I guess. No, it would be the Godzilla -1. Look at that one as well. It's another one that had a small budget and still beat out some bigger named films for its visual effects. So these things can be done, folks.
By the way, Alicia Vikander won Best Supporting Actress that year for the Danish Girl, but I think it was really for Ex Machina.
It was probably for this.
It might have been a two-hander, but still, they gave it to the fancy schmancy period piece. But I'd like to think that she won it for Ex Machina.
But seeing the conversations they have about AI, about it learning, about doing the Turing test, all of that. This film was written 10 years ago, and probably before that. I mean, it was made and released 10 years ago, but as we all know, if you follow anything with films, they first get the script a year, 2 years, 5 years before they actually make it. So this film was really having conversations ahead of its time in many respects, having these early conversations that are literally headlines today. And that's why I think this film holds up. And I think this film is still relevant today, and it should be watched. And it is just a prime example of why I've watched nearly all of Alex Garland's work, except I haven't seen Warfare. It's the only one of his work that he's directed I have not watched, and I have not been disappointed by any of his works. He's got a unique style, a unique approach, and while he doesn't have a huge body of work, he's one of those guys where when I see that name, I'm going to try to see the movie if I can, because of how he launched it with Ex Machina that you're just like, oh, I've got to get in on this. And he was writing 28 Days Later. He wrote that, and now he's, I think, directing the next two 28 years.
Well, I think he wrote it. I think Danny Boyle wrote
it. I'm sorry. Yeah, Danny Boyle directed,
but Alex Garland did write it. He came back to write it.
Right. I'm sorry. Yeah,
years later.
Yeah, he did write it. So it's great to see, but even those two films had an impact.
But to your point, Mark, he's a smart writer, and he doesn't play down to the audience. He's actually letting us infer more, think more. He has faith in us to get it and to see his themes and understand what he's doing, and put two and two together for ourselves. And even, like I said, do a rug pull on the protagonist perception here, and know that we will get it and understand it and feel good about that. I also think in some respects, this film is surprisingly kind of not anti-AI. I think it's actually showing that AI in the right hands can be a useful tool that can help people learn, and will learn and become more intuitive as it goes on. But of course, my biggest issue with AI today is the way people use it because they want to use it to cheat. We don't want to pay
Right.
writers in Hollywood. We'll just get an AI to do it. We'll tell them, make it a sequel like this movie and that movie and see what they come up with. That's a bad human, just like Nathan is a bad human here, misusing his AI, whether it's for, berating them or raping them or silencing them. So I think this is actually very proactive and positive about AI. Ava wants to learn. She wants to continue to be a being.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't. And before anybody says, I never get the impression, and maybe it's just me, Ex Machina, and actually some of the Alex Garden later's work too. This is not an anti-AI film. This is not an anti-man film. But what it is doing, and Angelique, you probably be best to answer if I'm wrong. It's not necessarily an anti-man film so much as it's pulling back the veil and showing character flaws, saying, hey, don't be like Caleb or Nathan, who we would see a similar character to Caleb and Nathan kind of combined this past year in Companion with Josh. Josh is both Nathan and Caleb, both. But would you say, Angelique, that this isn't an anti-man film so much as it's saying, hey, here's some flaws that we need to work on?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree there. It's not a big feminist film. It's not a big anti-patriarchy film. It's these dudes suck. Here's what they're doing. Don't do this, or else you might get stabbed in the gut by a robot.
I think in some respects that key line is when Ava, and I think this is the turning point for her, when she asked Caleb, "Are you a good person?"
Yeah. And he can't.
It's not, "Are you a good man?" It's, "Are you a good person?"
And he can't outright answer it.
Yeah.
He doesn't. That's right.
He doesn't outright answer a simple softball question.
Yep.
And he can't answer it because she proved just before that in that conversation, she can tell when he's lying.
Yes.
Right.
And the minute she tells that.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's like the thing, there's a difference between nice and good. And I always tell people, I'm not a nice person. I'm kind. I can be cruel if needed, but at the end of the day, I am a good person. I act, in a moral fashion. Sure. I don't go out of my way to harm anybody, but I'm not nice. Nice is George Carlin did that whole thing about breaking down the word nice, and he was right on the money. It's like that's why there's that stereotype of the nice guy or the nice girl. It's I am giving you what you want because I want something from you. It's transactional.
Right.
And the whole thing is transactional.
It's another suit, just like those suits hanging in Nathan's closet.
Yeah, the flesh suits for the AI.
I will try on this girlfriend as Caleb will try on being nice guy to get what he wants.
The man, the fact he kept the remnants of his previous robot females.
It's trophies.
It is closet. It is bedroom.
This is the signal of my superiority. I was able to, I got rid of them because they weren't good enough. And here's what wasn't good enough.
Oh, I just
he's gross.
And
he's a gross person
on the wall.
Yeah, and their heads
on the spike, like King Joffrey from Game of Thrones, for God's sake. Hey, just in case you're getting a little too big for your britches, Ava, remember I can put your head on here too. In fact, the last one looks like her, like it was a prototype of the face mask, like Madame Tussauds or something. Oh,
and Alex Garland would go on later to hold up that mirror again to folks, and it's probably why some of his films aren't exactly widely accepted, because again, like here in Ex Machina, it makes your audience feel uncomfortable when you hold that mirror up. You'd get later on the film Men from Alex Garland, which I'm going to tell you right now, Men is in a fascinating exploration into mourning and loss and sacrifice and suicide and all of that, as well as showing the darker side of patriarchy and such. But it's got one of the most still wild endings that beats out, I will say, just by a hair, beats out the substance in many ways. The ending, The Men, to this day was surprising that I'm sitting in a 100-seat plus theater watching Men, and you see that ending. If you've seen the ending, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but let me tell you, it comes out as somewhere that I didn't expect at all. And I was loving it. I was loving the fact that he takes chances. And you're right, Jeff. He's a smart filmmaker who makes movies that don't necessarily placate to your audience. He's making movies that he wants to say something and show, hey, here's how humans can be. Don't be these humans.
Right.
Here's how humans deal with this. This is not the way to deal with it.
When I saw that movie, Men, a couple male friends asked me afterwards, why was Rory Kinnear playing all those same characters?
Yes.
And I think they could have. I now think, Angelique, if you were there, I could have just turned to you and say, Angelique, and you would say, because I've met 100 of those Calebs, or those characters of Rory Kinnear, and they're all the same. Yeah. And then that man standing next to me with his quizzical look at you would probably say, even the kid. It's like, yes, even the boy, because it starts very early in their training.
Yes,
I thought that was genius. That it didn't matter who they were, from the cop to the priest to the kid to the creeps. One actor, because they're all part and cut from the same cloth. God damn, it's brilliant.
It is. And Alex Garland really is one of those filmmakers, those modern, I guess you could say modern filmmakers that, is why I love cinema, is watching movies like his, because it gives me hope and faith too, that, not everything is an IP. And don't get me wrong, I love my IP stuff too, but I'm glad to see films like this, Ex Machina, and later on getting wide release, getting into more theaters than just an art house, even though they are kind of art house films, because it gives people at least some exposure to other films that, shows you why we love this medium, I think, so much, is films like Ex Machina. So thank you, Angelique. Thank you, Jeff. We're going to wrap it up tonight. I know it's especially getting late for Angelique, but I thank you for our live viewers. I thank you for all of folks who watch these afterwards. I appreciate the support quite a bit. And now, as always, I give a license to shill to my wonderful panel here. So, Angelique, you are first. You got stuff coming. I know we talked about before, but let my listeners here know about what project you've got in the fire, so to speak.
So Frankenflix is still in the works. I was going to start filming this month. However, I have to move because my landlord is selling my house. So I'm putting the actual filming on hold until I get into my new place, where I will have the perfect, well-lit kitchen to bring you Frankenflix, which is kind of a shame because I have a refrigerator full of different types of hot dogs that need to be eaten. So
that's why you got coolers. You put them in coolers and transport them.
We got a freezer, You got
a freezer.
Like,
there you go.
And I'm building out my recipes and making my movie lists. I'll just go ahead and let everybody know that I am starting with Nosferatu 2024.
The most recent peen on the big screen.
Yeah. And then I will do the inspiration for what started Frankenflix, which is Creep 2.
I can't wait to see those recipes that correspond with films that show the male anatomy, which is a wonderful concept, Angelique. I am all here for that. I can't wait to see what your wonderful mind comes up with.
Yeah, so, I've got to find folks that can edit. I'm gonna be all over Fiverr and probably picking your brain and Garrett's brain and probably Daniel's brain to get my theme song.
Well, there you go. But yeah, keep an eye out for that soon, folks, because yeah, it's going to be definitely a creative show. And speaking of creative shows, Mr. York, the license to shill is yours.
You can follow my reviews, the establishingshot.org, as you said at the front of the show. I also write some essays each month for Pipeline Artists Magazine online about the industry and trends in the business and things on the big and small screen. I'm Jeff York Writer on Instagram. You can follow me there. And I also am Jeff York, I think. Actually, I'm Jeff York Chicago on Instagram. Sorry, Jeff York Writer. And I know it's inconsistent branding. How dare I? I'm in marketing regularly too as a full-time job. But on Instagram, I'm Jeff York Chicago, as well as Jeff York Chicago on TikTok, where I do 1 minute mini reviews of films and shows. And I do some caricatures on the side. I have a website, Jeff York Caricatures, available for hire for special commission, family member, pet, favorite TV or movie star, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. So check out that as well. I'll put a link to the establishing shot in the body of this video. And thank you all for tuning in. We are still in Artificially Yours month. We've got next week, we are going way back where we're going to cover the classic silent sci-fi film Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Ooh.
Yes. So tune in for that, folks. Like,
Nice.
subscribe, bells and whistles, all that here. I thank you for watching. And until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.